My name is Ryan. I'm a PhD candidate in ecology, and I study elephant carcasses. I want to know what is the long-term impact of an elephant carcass on the environment. I want to know what's happening to the nutrients that leave the carcass. I also want to know how this affects elephant behaviors. I want to know how this could impact woody vegetation. Do plants growing there actually uptake those nutrients at an increased rate? And I also want to know, how does this change years down the road? We have carcasses that I've been to that are everywhere from just a few weeks old, and for some of them completely fresh, to several years old. And we monitor them over time because we really want to see that ecological succession. Is it true that this carcass will, over time, as it decomposes, even though a lot of it's eaten by hyenas and scavengers and vultures, there's still a very big body on that landscape that's going to, in some way, have an ecological impact. And because it's elephants, and elephants are fascinated by the bones of their dead brethren, they come back and they revisit, meaning that these sites are unique, and we want to see what they're doing in the environment. What's the impact of it? I'm in Kruger National Park, South Africa. It's a very big park. It's almost the size, I know it's twice the size of Yellowstone. I think it might be around the same size as New Jersey. It's quite big. And I travel all around the park, depending on where there's elephant carcasses. Essentially, we learn about the elephant carcasses from the game rangers, or anybody. Sometimes we find vultures circling. If there's vultures, we'll head to a different area. But we have the coordinates for a carcass, or we find a carcass ourselves. And we travel to the carcass, sometimes very old, sometimes it's young, sometimes it's one we've been back to again. We mark the center, and then we do a lot of ecological surveys there. Depending on the carcass, let's say we're getting to the first carcass, or this is a new carcass. We'll visit it and do our markup, install camera traps. Depends on how fresh it is. If it's very fresh, we can't do bone fields because there's still a body there. So we set up camera traps, or we do a vegetation survey. And if it's a bit older, like if it's one we heard about and we knew that was there, and we find bones, then we mark the location of all of the bones, and we'll return to these carcasses a year later. So I'm in my final field season now. So I'm going back to all of the places that I've been already. I've been here for almost a full year, and I was here in 2023 as well to mark some of these locations. And so now I'm going back to all these locations and seeing how they've changed. I'm looking at plant regrowth, I'm looking at elephant behavior, I'm collecting camera trap data, vegetation data, tree core data. This is now the data collection stage, essentially. I think, and I don't have the proof for this yet, but I think that elephants are visiting members of their family, and specifically female carcasses, more than males. Females generally live in groups, and they know each other, they remember each other, while males are usually solitary, especially after a certain age. They're essentially kicked out, and then the matriarch runs the herd of elephants. And the female carcasses, I see many more repeated visits by elephants. And when they're visiting, they're actually picking bones up and taking them away. We found them roll skulls almost like balls for 2 or 3 kilometers. They pick up jaw bones. They'll go for tusks if they're still there, ribs. And so they're essentially picking up bones and moving them, spreading them out into the environment. And when they're visiting, because it's an elephant and they're there for a while, they're defecating, they're urinating, and so they are changing the chemistry of that location. So sure. So plants, to be able to grow, just like you and I, they need a lot of different types of nutrients. 2 of the big ones that we study are like phosphorus and nitrogen. So plants need a certain amount of phosphorus and nitrogen to be able to grow. If you remember photosynthesis, it's carbon dioxide, water, and sunlight, yes, but they also need a little bit of these other nutrients. And elephant dung and elephant urine and elephant bodies, all of our bodies and all of our waste products have these nutrients in them. Animal waste products and animal bodies have nutrients that plants can use to grow. And so when elephants are revisiting, they're essentially changing what nutrients are there in the ground. And when they decompose, they're also changing that soil. we found that the respiration, soil breathes because there's microorganisms in the soil. And so we found that the carbon dioxide, the respiration from carcass sites, is higher than the surrounding area, which means the microbes are consuming tiny bits and leftover nutrients. And they're also fueling plants, which means more photosynthesis, which means that these areas, we think, over time, will become more lush than the surrounding savanna. And that also attracts grazers, because just like you at the supermarket would pick the best greens, well, grazing animals like impala and certain rhinos, they'll pick the greenest vegetation. So if that greenest veg is at a carcass site, that means these carcass sites are pulling in more and more of these animals because they're interested in that high quality plant matter. There's always issues with vehicles. I've had to change more flats than I even care to talk about. We've been stuck at different borders. I've had vehicles break down in the middle of the bush, and we've had to walk back and then walk back to fix them in the bush. I'm not a mechanic, but I've had to learn how to do a lot of things well beyond what I thought my capability was, just because if you're in the bush and you break down and there's nothing for 60, 80, or 100 kilometers, you have to figure out a way to get the car running. A lot of wildlife encounters, but never been attacked, never been harassed. I've been very, very close to elephants. I've been walking in the bush and had them cross my path. I've been right next to lions. Lots of different animals that most people would think as dangerous, and they can be if you do something to upset them or if they get defensive. But I've never had an issue with wildlife, but I have had a lot of experiences of being extraordinarily close to elephants, to buffalo. I've always been fascinated by living things and also how we all interact with our environment. I mean, in what you would say like the modern world, or going from like building to building and looking from screen to screen, it doesn't really feel like you're connected, but you literally are. The food that you eat becomes your body. You're breathing right now. You're respiring out carbon dioxide. The plants around me are photosynthesizing, releasing oxygen. You're always connected to the natural world. And that's always been something that I was really fascinated in. I was drawn to Africa because of the question itself. The fact that we don't know the long-term impacts of an elephant carcass is just astounding to me. I had thought that this was a question that we kind of knew the answer to. I think that we get too used to being able to Google or ask AI or chat or whatever answers to questions. It feels like we know everything, but we don't. There's so much we don't know. That's why there's so many scientists. And I'm extremely privileged to be part of that. So my biggest motivation was realizing we as a species didn't know the answer to what I thought was a pretty fundamental question. And to be able to work towards the answer, I think, is what really drove me here.